sort of kicking off sort of quite early. This is something I did in my last year at the Royal College of Art, which was a three-dimensional poster for the film Judex. I managed to discover a vacuum forming machine in the college and thought it would be put to good use in doing a 3D poster, which I think was probably the first time a 3D poster had been produced. And this is the follow-up, another poster. I suppose during my last year at college, this was basically my lucky break. The Stones called the college and asked for a student to be sent along to talk to Mick Jagger about doing a touring poster. Luckily I was sent along and the meeting went well, and this is what I produced for that. Then the following year, that was followed up by another request to go and meet with Jagger and talk about a logo for what was going to be the new label for the new record label, and for letterheads and so on. It had quite a sort of humble beginning in that it was going to be for limited use, but over the years it's sort of taken off. That was followed by yet another travel poster, then again harking back to the 30s and 40s kind of style, and very much a follow-up on the 1970 tour poster. I switched to something which was probably more Magritte style, but photographic, for the next tour. And yet another job for the Stones during that period.
So I just wanted to talk about two different artists that I've worked with, both of whom I've had long relationships with, and we've kind of developed them over time. Dizzy Rascal I've worked with for about 10 years, and Uncle, which is James's band, James Avell, I've worked with for about 20 years. These are Two Sleeves, that's Boy in the Corner, Dizzy's first album, and that's James's latest album, Where Did the Night Fall? So I'll just start with Uncle. Uncle is basically a collaborative music project. James is always in charge of the music as the kind of key man, and he works with a main single collaborator, so it tends to be a duo, but he just brings in loads of collaborative artists on the music side, but also on the visual side. The early work was heavily dependent on Futura, who kind of defined the visual identity of the band, because it wasn't about the band as such, because there was constantly changing personnel. These characters came from a painting that James had bought off Futura, and we just developed it alongside, and that became the first identity for the band. Whenever I start a project, I always tend to start with a typography, just as a way of kind of feeling my way into the project and just starting to create a kind of environment where the characters will sit. The early work was kind of otherworldly and very science fiction influenced, as you can see. Science fiction is a massive influence on me and James. So yeah, Dizzy is the only artist who I've actually actively sought out to work with, because I was a huge fan. It happened that I knew his manager from a previous job that I'd done, so we worked out a way of making it happen. Again, there are similarities in the typography. Everything was fine. The first shoot, he was a bit nervous because it was his first sleeve, so he didn't want to be made to look silly. When I'm in a shoot, I tend to just generate as much stuff as possible, because a lot of the actual work is done in post-production. I realised later that was actually the cover shot was actually the very last shot we took on the day, and he was really he wasn't happy about it. He didn't want to. He was just uncomfortable about sitting in a corner making horns with his fingers. But I think that's one of the most iconic things I've done. I was asked back to do his third, again sort of developing his just his whole identity, placing him in a world that I create for him. By this time, his third record, he was kind of open to a slightly more playful approach. Again, just through the trust I think we've built up over that time.
Well, this is one of the first ones I ever did, and it's still my favourite, I think. And it's for a band, a great friend of mine who's sitting over there, for his band, El Brutus. And this is from 1998. The album was called Tonight You Had a Special One, but the sleeve design, which kicked around pubs where we discussed it for weeks, was a scribble of an idea I had for a sculpture or an installation, which is called I've Got a Window Wednesday, which is a yuppie suicide pact. So the idea is that these two yuppies, these executives, were so busy they had to get together to kill themselves on a Wednesday when they had a window, if it's a double. And it turned out that we had to use the cars that we had actually hired for the shoot didn't turn up, so we had to use the executives from Island Records company cars, which made it all the more beautiful. And then they got fired almost immediately afterwards, but whether it's connected to this, I don't know. So, as I say, I've done quite a lot of record sleeves, but as an artist, I've made more work about music. This is quite old now. This is from 2006, I think. You have to bear with me while I try and explain. I grew up in a crap town called Goole, which is like a port town in the north of England. It's a very grim, sort of post-industrial place, really. And there was a guy there who was a few years older than me called Storky, and like everything else in Goole, punk arrived in Goole in like 1983 rather than 1976. And this guy was like a die-hard punk, his tartan trousers and horrible scabby Mohican, and every town has them, And so I imagined what had happened to Storky in the 20 years since I'd left there. And I did a project before this, which is just called Storky, which is where he gets his old band back together, and the band are called the Reprobates. And eventually, over a series of 12 posters, you see that the band leave him increasingly, and he designs the posters, and he gets increasingly vitriolic. So they start off as Storky and the Reprobates, and they end up as Storky and a turncoat fucking wankers, I think, his last one. So the two guys, Steve and Daz from the Reprobates, they leave Storky, and they start a Goa trance night in Goole. And these are the posters that they designed for their Goa trance night in the back of this shitty pub. And if you've never been to Goole, you have to imagine somewhere really horrible, and then you imagine a really horrible pub on an estate, and then imagine a Goa trance night in the back room. And so this night was called Flirtation, and it's got all these kind of horrible cliches. And this project is it started off because I write a lot, and I started writing a story about the Reprobates and what became of them. And I realised actually I can actually try and make it into, try and really almost like writing through graphic design. So I designed a series of posters, which I'll show you now, where Daz and Steve renamed themselves as Cosmic Tentacle and DJ Astral D, and they've got rid of Storky, and they start this trance night, and it goes brilliantly well. It's £5 to get in. It shuts at 11, of course. And so the next night they do, Storky's been pressurising them because he wants a piece of their scene, because they've made like 20 quid or something like that, and they're quite popular. So out of kind of misplaced generosity, they allowed Storky, the die-hard punk, to do a short live set. And you see on the bottom right there, he does a short live set at their Flirtation night. Of course, it goes down terribly. Nobody's interested. But it gives Storky a kind of foothold into their world. So the next night, even though this one's gone really well, Storky's kind of managed to muscle his way back in again. He's even got involved in the design of the posters. So he's got a picture of Hitler that says, "I am not a bummer." And he's kind of shrunk down their area now, and he's sort of got his Storky live set stuff in. Being an egomaniac that he is, he's charging £7 because he wants more money, and it's open till 1. And of course, this goes terribly. But still, nevertheless, unperturbed, Storky has really now almost got full control of the Goa Flirtation night, and so it's become Goule's only Goa trans punk crossover night, which is just a hideous scene, So basically, this is Storky's now taking control. And the final one, where he actually, like he does with everything, he totally ruins it. It's gone down to £1 to get in. Doors open at 9, but they probably think shuts at 10. And he's now got full control of the poster, and he's forced them back into the band. So they've become again Daz and Steve, who escaped and have this kind of minor, beautiful life in the back room of a pub as Goa DJs, are now back in the mutinous fifth columnist fucking wankers, and nothing's changed.